This segment of the class, we need to really start looking at how we plan and use research. Um, so what are the processes we go through when we are planning out a research study? What are the steps that we go through? What are the considerations we must look at when we're planning a research project? So that really is what this module is about. Um, Research plans have to have a goal or an objective. Usually that is based on, again, when we're looking at applied research, that is actually getting the information needed to make a decision. It's not the researcher's goal to make the decision, but the researcher's goal is to um, get the information and present the information in order for a decision to be made. Whether that's developing a strategy, writing communication objectives. In our area, usually it's that information needed to make some sort of communication-based decision. Trade-offs in doing research, obviously, there's gonna be some trade-offs when you do research based on some sort of time, cost, precision that you need. Ambiguity. Obviously, you don't want your results to be ambiguous. Um, you want to probably have as solid a um, outcome so that a firm decision can be made. The more precise you make the information, the more that drives up the cost and time. For example, if you had research saying 9 out of 10 consumers liked your brand, well, that's pretty good. But you'd rather have like maybe 900 out of 1,000. I think the book uses this example. Yeah, but asking 1,000 people probably is, well, it obviously is more work than asking 10 people. Probably you're going to have to use some sort of trade-off there, bringing down the cost and time, but also increasing the ambiguity. So maybe you don't do 1,000, maybe you do 300. So 270 out of 300, or maybe you do 500, 450 out of 500. Maybe it's just 100. You have to take into consideration the cost and the time. The less ambiguity you have, the more that's probably going to increase your cost and time. So that's something that you have to look at. You have to have trade-offs in doing that research. Steps in a research plan, obviously problem definition. What is the problem that we're dealing with? And this is where you have to be careful. You're defining the research based on the problem, but the problem might not actually be the actual problem. It might just be a manifestation of the problem. Maybe its sales are going down. Maybe it's traffic is if you're a restaurant or a hotel or something like that, maybe its traffic is declining. Well, that isn't maybe necessarily the problem. That's just the manifestation of the problem. So you've got to be careful to define, in our sense, and what we're studying here, the communication problem. Is this an awareness problem? Yeah, going back to those steps that we talked about previously. Awareness, knowledge, liking, preference, conviction, actual action of some sort. So you have to define the problem in a way that we can research it. Sales, foot traffic isn't necessarily the problem that we're worried. Well, we are worried about it, but it is not the problem that we need to study. How are we gonna study this problem? What method are we gonna use? Are we going to use surveys? Are we going to do just secondary research? Are we going to do qualitative research, focus groups, or in-depth interviews? What methods are we going to use? Are we going to use all of those? Lots of times we do all of them, but again, the ambiguity goes down, but the cost and time go up. Maybe we only have time to do one, maybe we can do two, maybe we don't want any ambiguity, so we're willing to pay from cost in money and in time uh, to do the research to get all three done. So we've got to determine the method that we're going to use. Data collection, obviously we go out there and collect data. Sometimes this can be fairly easy in with secondary research, which we'll talk about. Lots of times it can be quite complicated in a focus group or in a survey. It's not just that easy to just go out and collect data sometimes. Analysis and interpretation. We get the data back. What does this data tell us? What does this information tell us? And then what does it mean? It isn't enough just to say a certain percentage of people believe this. What does that mean? What is the interpretation of that mean for the decision that we're doing, for our problem that we've defined? And then action steps. What do we take after that to solve the problem? So that's something that we've got to look at. Research versus intuition. Research is conducted when the decision is significant, complex, requires new knowledge. Basically, research is conducted when we've got to make a decision. Research is, and we want that decision to be based on fact, that new knowledge that we're looking for. Again, we don't do research just to know. Even if research we do on an ongoing basis, it might seem like just an exercise, but it's because we'll need that information at some point to make a decision. We might not need it right now, but we will probably be needing that information to make a decision. The reason why we just keep gathering data on an ongoing basis is when we want to make a decision, we don't want to have to wait for the research to be done. That's why we keep gathering data and doing research on an ongoing basis. So we don't have to wait for the research to make that decision. The research has been done, the analysis has been, the interpretation analysis has been conducted, and we have the information there to make a decision. So that's why we keep gathering data on an ongoing basis. So that's really sort of the process of this. I've got another presentation that I just put together. It's a little bit more in depth on what goes into the process of research, design, and implementation, and what we use with that information. So this is sort of just a small tidbit, and I give you some more in-depth information in that other presentation.